looking like breeze.
Hello, and welcome to the Anexinet Infrastructure Modernization podcast. Here on AIM, we invite industry professionals and subject matter experts on to discuss current trends and technology topics. You may notice that the voice coming to you is a little different from the sultry tones of Christopher Hayner. My name is Brenda Heisler. I've been hosting podcasts for a couple of years now. I currently am the operations lead at Anexinet, and I'll be coming on periodically to host the Women in Tech podcast. We are bringing those back for those of you who have been listening for a while. Today we have some lovely women from HPE to talk about the evolving environment today, women in technology, empowering women, and specifically how HPE is making efforts to support women both in technology and in education. Let's go around the room. So let's start off. We have Patti McGlinchy from HPE. Patricia, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes, hi. I am the partner business manager for Anexinet. I've been that for quite a number of years. I have been with HPE, hold your breath, 38 years. My background in education, which was quite a bit ago, I do have an undergraduate in liberal arts, but then I did get an MBA. So the combination of the business and the communication skills. My focus is managing the HPE relationship from a channel perspective, reporting into Leslie Maher, who is also on this call with us. And I have been responsible for basically the entire relationship at Anexinet and work also with Amy Santucci, who is on this call, from an end user perspective. So as we like to say at Anexinet with HPE, I am the one throat to choke. All things come to me and through me. And I work with both Leslie and Amy. So I'll turn it over to Leslie at this point.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Pat. And Brenda, thank you so much for including me in this. This is great. I'm really excited to participate. My role at HPE is I'm the Vice President of our North America channel partners in our ecosystem. I started my career actually as a software engineer, so early women in tech. And I decided I really enjoyed the outcome of technology, not necessarily the application of the technology. So I shifted to early in my career pre-sales engineer, which kind of led me into sales ultimately. So I've held different roles. I've been at Sun Microsystems for probably a good majority of my career. I transitioned over to Cisco, and then joined HPE about 7 years ago, leading our server business. And in the past few years, channels, which I absolutely love. And I've been really fortunate in all of my roles to both grow promotionally, but also laterally to get new experiences. So been very fortunate and really enjoying my role at HPE and working with Anexinet. So Amy, how about you?
Thanks, Leslie and Brenda. Appreciate the opportunity, as well as Pat. I will just give a shout out here to Anexinet. They're such a fantastic partner, and I'm so thrilled to be able to work with them. So thank you for the opportunity. So I am the Senior Director here at HPE for the Mid-Atlantic region. So everything from New Jersey down through the entire state of Pennsylvania, DC, Maryland, Virginia, down to the Carolinas. And I have been in the industry for over 20 years. I entered the tech world after finishing a degree in computer science mathematics, and then went to Carnegie Mellon University, which I was fortunate to be connected to some of the engineering alumni there, which springboarded my career. And I had an amazing opportunity to work for RPS Ground, which you may not recognize that name, which is now FedEx Ground. And what we were able to do was change the entire package delivery industry. This business model that we did really took a labor-based business, if you think about that, and changed the use of it by using technology to gain efficiencies and expedite deliveries, as well as sizable cost reductions. So how do we do this? We really did it by the use of barcode technology. There, I was the director of research engineering, and I engaged with Compaq Computer Corporation. And then from Compaq, I had worked with them so closely that they asked me to come over and work for Compaq Corporation, which of course was acquired by HP and now HPE. But in my role at HPE, I've been so fortunate to be able to work in every single business unit in the company, including leading services, GreenLake, which is our premier product for as a service, hybrid IT solutions for hybrid cloud, in both commercial and public sector. So I've really been able to work across every single customer's base. It's afforded me an opportunity to work everything from Wall Street to Main Street. And, in every single industry as well, vertical industry, which is, financial and retail, healthcare and manufacturing. So it has been a fantastic journey.
So I've had a relationship with Pat McGlinchy for a while, but it's my first time really having a conversation with you, Amy, and Leslie. And so I'm really excited to be able to get into these topics today and really hear your experiences. So let's hop in. Our first topic today, we're really looking into, with the new and working environment today, how has that transition worked for you? I know we all were in office, really working face to face. But then, I don't know if you've heard, but COVID happened. And all of a sudden we had to make this massive transition into home, building out a home office, figuring out how we can keep that work-life balance. So I really want to get your thoughts on how have things changed for you with the COVID world of remote? And even as things are opening up, a lot of companies are staying remote. So how are you and HPE handling that?
For me, my role has always required that I do a lot of travel. So I would say the new norm of not traveling is probably the big difference for me. So I didn't have a home office, an office per se. I worked from home when I wasn't traveling. I had offices that I could go to. So the big change for me, I think, is not being face to face with our partners or customers, not traveling. And I think the big adjustment was early on when the pandemic hit, was we quickly shifted to this back to back calls that I know we all deal with. I'm not the only one. And what happened is you didn't have transition time. So when you were traveling, you'd be at the airport, you might have a few minutes of downtime, or you are out with people and you have a little bit of time to grab lunch or dinner. So that has been a big adjustment. I'm fortunate, at HPE's really rallied to help us kind of transition through this. A couple of things the company did to help with work-life balance, because I have to be honest, that is something that I continue to work on. I need a little help there. I probably can't give a lot of advice there. I'm still myself trying to take advice, but HPE helped with the concept of Wellness Fridays. One Friday a month, we would essentially be working on our own personal needs that we needed from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock on a Friday. And we even extended that to a couple of days in the summer. So I think, managing that work-life balance has been, in this new norm, something that we're still all figuring out, because the new norm changes. It's been a journey for, 18 to 20 months here. But I think that for me personally, I will remain what we call a remote worker, where I, predominantly work from home. I go into an office when I want to collaborate and engage, but I've actually started to be back out, on the road again. It's really nice. It's a different experience. There's a lot more restrictions, but, we're transitioning now. But I think the support from the company was really about how do we have that work-life balance to create some boundaries and get some support, as we created kind of this new edge to office vision we have on how we now work post-pandemic.
Great. And I can certainly, this is Amy, and I can add to that. So I completely agree with Leslie. It's really living now in the new normal. And when you look at it, when you first started, I was up in New York, came back, and I thought, oh, I was up there almost every single week and traveled every week, multiple cities generally. So really coming back to a home office, first everybody thought it was going to be 2 weeks, then it was going to be a month, then 2 months, then 3 months, which extended out, right? So trying to navigate through that. And it was just, one of the things I did was really stop to smell the roses. And I always look back at this and reflect and saying, if everybody stays safe and healthy, it's actually been a good reset and a reboot actually in our industry overall, in the sense of, it's allowed me and afforded me time to be able to do some things that I always wanted to do on my list of, oh yes, I'm going to get to that. So I was able to read additional books, and one I definitely recommend is, Good to Great by Jim Collins, great book. Also the growth mindset. So just being able to have a little more time, that you are actually being able to carve out some time. So, I always say invest in yourself. That's one of my biggest coaching areas overall. And I always like to learn new things every single day. And so this is an area that we can invest in people, which I really felt like I was able to do, was and invest further in my my family and friends, get reacquainted with many people that I really didn't have the time for in the past because we were on the road. And even with customers, even though they were remote, setting up new ways of connecting with them, there's no substitution for meeting customers in person and partners. Being able to look at, how can we make that customer and partner experience still valuable? We found so many creative ways to do it. I became, which I think for the first time, more of an expert on wine, right? We had so many wine virtual events.
Didn't we all become experts on wine?
A new skill
in multiple ways.
In multiple ways, right? Things that I would have never, ever learned. I've never to take the time to stop and understand that. They also said, oh, you're now a platinum member on this organization. You're getting into some of these virtual events and watching, we did some golf virtual events with customers, which was great to see that and to understand it from a different view. So overall, I do think that, working with people, whether that's virtual or in person, makes a difference in everything we do. And I've also seen that, more so than before, even with my children being home from school, you really learn from what they're learning and being able to see clearer, actually, that people have different styles and certainly different talents. And to be able to take that and expand upon that and being able to also look at this. And I was able to carve out some additional time, which again, I always, wanted to do. I never got a chance to do it more than a couple times a year. But I was able to do some virtual sessions over COVID for some of the school programs for STEM girls. And that was really, for me, a great way to spend some of my time. I always really like coaching, especially early career, and helping them learn. And I always say, in some cases, you learn through your mistakes on your journeys. If I can lend some advice in that area to early career, especially females in the STEM field, I'm always willing to do that. And it really afforded me that potential to make that happen.
And Brenda, as you know, I was always on site at Anexinet. I mean, I had my own office there. Yeah. And so it became actually just another piece of my trusted advisor role. Anexinet folks look to me to figure out, how are we going to do this? How are we going to accomplish what we want to accomplish in this new world? And like Amy said, we thought it was 2 weeks, and then we thought it was a month. And then we had to get into the groove of the Zoom, and we had to understand that we could actually accomplish the alignment. It was just done differently. And, Anexinet, as you know, Brenda, did, because Patti does an amazing job with the marketing. We did do those mixology events, and we did all of that. And at first it was a bit uncomfortable because Anexinet folks are such people person, and they, everybody likes to get together, and we all know each other's families. And it was difficult and a little bit uncomfortable at first. But once again, they looked to me to say, okay, what are you guys doing? What's the directive from Antonio? How are you guys doing it? And so it became another part of my job to guide them through COVID. And we did okay. I mean, we really did okay. We just move on to the next thing. And I will say that, we're getting back to traveling and going to some meetings. And there are some parts of the days where I think, I'm wasting so much time because I'm in a car and I could be doing this. And so it is, you looked at something that you didn't really want to accept at the time. And now you're looking back and saying, that wasn't so bad. So we just move on to the next phase.
Patti, I'll just add on to that. That was sort of one of my learnings, is that everything before the pandemic was, I tried to do as much face-to-face because that's a great way to build relationships. But to the point, it takes a lot of time. So you actually are touching fewer people or having, fewer touch points. And so, the takeaway now is, I think there's a really good balance, right? Face really matters, but filling in the gaps between face-to-face with a video conference is a really great way to, I think, actually be more present and be able to reach out to more people than you could have in the previous way. So I had that same experience.
And I really have to give a shout out to HPE for the concept of the Wellness Fridays and then enlarging them. And all of my partners got used to it. They would be like, I'm not going to bother her on Wellness Friday. We don't want to. And I think some of them are even considering it within their own organizations because they saw that it was really a healthy way to approach this. And I just like to thank HPE because they recognized it. They recognized that we did need that.
I would agree with you on that. Wellness Friday was the #1 favorite item this year at HPE's. To Leslie's point, she said, we had 2 days during the month in the summertime where, generally on a Friday, it was time where, generally when you're off, it's vacation, it's holiday. I mean, you already have things planned, right? Or if it's a holiday, stores are closed. I mean, you could do things and catch up on things, again, that we never really had time to do. So it was a huge plus and so appreciated. No question about that. And I know that that's been the number one request moving forward to ask HR for, is to return to Wellness Fridays.
Yes.
The other thing I want to say, I felt like I was able to institute is, when you talk about that windshield time, no question about it. So what we've learned, I personally learned, is that there are some things that now that can be more acceptable virtual, but no substitution again for going back and meeting with customers and partners. But how can you balance that now? So it is a reset. And again, as I mentioned before, a reboot in that area. And so when I look at that, I think, there's always things you want to do from a personal perspective as well. So I've implemented a, do not cancel policy, like do not cancel that gym appointment. Don't, go to the gym as you plan to do. And before, with travel and time that was, less available, it was something that you could always give up, right? So it makes it easy to give it up. Or don't cancel that meeting that you wanted to meet a friend and you were trying to schedule that for 2 months. So that's something that I really took it into saying, I want to make sure that you can provide that balance overall and making sure that, we are supporting not only what we're doing from a personal perspective, but also supporting our teams. I got to learn more about people's dogs, their children's names, across the board. You see them on the video cameras, which again, we've never been able to see that before. And, we would have certain days where you could, bring your pet to the meeting. And so it was just another learning that we could also make sure we had some additional things to talk about and everybody could tell their own story, which I always find value in understanding our people.
And I have to tell you that personal aspect expanded to my resellers. And I will give the example. It was a ride. It was an Anexinet call with Kevin Blaine. And his little one, for some reason, dressed up in a costume. Especially she does this a lot. And she was jumping down behind Kevin while we were having a meeting. And nobody was like saying anything. Sort of, it was like, the elephant in the room. And finally, we all started laughing. And Kevin said, "What is she doing?" He was trying to ignore her so that she would go away, but that wasn't stopping her. And I have to tell you that this is the CEO, the president of it, and everybody was so endeared to Kevin because of the way he handled his child on the call. And that's something that nobody would have ever seen that before. If I just brought Kevin into an accident, he never would have talked about it. And they still talk about it today. So I think, and you're right, the dogs, the cats, everything, you had a less of the face-to-face contact, but you still had the intimacy with folks because you were in their homes. Right.
Right. So some real changes there that I felt like there's some real benefit. There's some real positive that you can take away from this. Again, if everybody stays safe and healthy and continuing along that line, it definitely had some benefits overall.
So is this something that you're thinking will continue on, just like this kind of blurring of the personal life leaking in through, virtual conferences and the like? Is this something that you think will be sticking around?
I do. I think what this highlighted is it's all about the whole person, right? And so, what we're talking about is that, that personal side of everyone who we work with. And then, HPE's made a really big priority around wellness. I think, again, this, not that this is new, but, I think it just highlighted the need for, the support of the individual. And so, we talked about Wellness Friday. We all love it. So we all have talked about that. For me personally, it really just that little bit of time to recharge really was beneficial. We, have a lot of resources for our employees to help, whether it's, with, exercise and supporting exercise in kind of a virtual way, or, access to classes, whether it's podcasts or employee assistance, because, it has created new challenges, particularly for people who have young children at home, that was particularly hard. I did not have that. I found it hard even just to balance my life with my dog. So, for those who had to deal with, children at home, there are extra pressures. And, I think we're going to continue to see that there is a little bit more flow between personal and work, and figuring out the boundaries are really important. But also, I think supporting the individual, is a big priority for us. And I also think creating an environment, we call it an edge to cloud vision. And what that really is about connectivity and to do your job, kind of where you're working. It's about creating a culture if you are not always in an office, and productivity. And so I think, giving people some of those flexibilities that come with that work environment, I think is going to make it more supportive, particularly for women who might need some flexibility. We also implemented a really flexible parental leave policy, right? So we provide up to 6 months for mother or father parental leave. All of these things I think help create an environment that's also going to really, foster and nurture women and keep women in our work environment. So I think those are all positives, and I do think it is a change on how we all work.
Yeah, I agree with that. And speaking of that, looking at the latest Census Bureau information, men do make up 52% of the U.S. workers, but 73% of the all STEM workers. So we still have work to do when we talk about, women and girls going into the STEM field overall. And it's an area that I know from an HPE perspective, we have several programs with the Women's Network, and I know Antonio Neri, our CEO, will be speaking further about that, and he has been a great leader for our females here at HPE. But a couple of things in that area. Again, as I mentioned, the Wellness Fridays did give me an opportunity to be able to reconnect with some of those organizations to be able to make sure we can continue to promote at an early age girls in the STEM field. And then at HPE, one of the things, from an informal perspective is you're creating mentors, right? So talking to some of the younger females, early career that are now going through, having to do that coaching and are having to watch younger children, setting up, specific coaching and mentorship sessions with them overall, it's been really valuable, because we have a lot of talent here at HPE and people, do make the difference. So, a couple of things I really recommend to them because they're saying, how did you really do that? Obviously pre-pandemic, no question, really be looking at making sure they have a sponsor overall. So looking at employees and especially, females in this, the business and making sure they do have a sponsor overall. And then from a company perspective, I think it's always good to make sure we give them opportunities to really stand and deliver so that they can be visible, right? And if I look at it from a team perspective, from my team overall, I look at it as it's great to have the mix and diversity of males, females overall. It really makes your entire team think and act differently, is if you look at that across the board. And then one example I have in this area, which is a great story, is and back in 2019, I was asked to be able to spearhead a roundtable. We were going to do the Pensando launch with John Chambers and Antonio Neri, and I was asked to be able to MC the roundtable of that. And the goal was they asked me to make sure, since I was working a lot of Wall Street, that we could bring in a representative CIO from every bank in Wall Street. So it's about 21 banks overall. And we had a successful event, a great event, launched this and talked to John Chambers and Antonio were fantastic. And it was such an iconic moment to see the two of them together that one of the CIOs came over to me afterwards and said, really great job. And I said, well, thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words. And he goes, and it was great to have you in the room. And I said, well, all of us. And he said, no, you're the only female in the room. So about 25 people in the room, I was the only female and I looked around and I thought, I didn't even realize that. So it's great to be able to have that representation also from sponsors that are going to make sure that they provide that recognition and visibility as well.
You used two terms there. You mentioned mentor and then sponsor. Do you see a difference between those two terms and the roles that they play?
Yeah, no, actually, I do. When I look at this and I go from my own experiences in my career, I have had sponsors and from my perspective, because we work in an industry that is predominantly male, they have been male sponsors in the sense of, saying, hey, this is what are your goals for your career and helping to sponsor that, right? Helping to help you guide you to the next step, how to get there and really providing that coaching. I've had formal mentors actually in my career journey that have been carved out for me. Like, for instance, when I went over from the commercial space into the federal space, I had no federal experience, zero, right? But I went into this and they formally assigned me a female mentor who had known the federal business obviously was there to help me to answer any questions about the federal business specifically or about the career. And I found her engagement with me as a formal mentorship program, which means that, we would set up meetings with a specific cadence every single month, right? So we would have meetings and we were able to meet in person. We were able to have lunch together to talk about any challenges or any areas that I felt were still gray to me. And that was invaluable. So I really had two, right? A sponsor helped me with directing my career, but more of a formal mentorship program to help me from a journey from a female leader perspective. And both were invaluable to me. And I really do recommend that for early career females, coming into the business.
Yeah, I'd almost describe three roles, right? I think, Amy, you're spot on, is that, there's the concept of a mentor, a sponsor, and I even consider the third one as role models, right? And I think they all have different roles, in, I think, your personal growth, so, as Amy mentioned, the mentors are, trusted advisor, someone who maybe can give you advice, provide perspective. I've had some fantastic mentors. They've tended to be more formal relationships. I think, to your point, Amy, where you set some time and you connect with a mentor. I've also been really fortunate to have sponsors, and sponsors are the people who take that active role, who help get you into the right situations that I think can help your career. And then I think the role model for me is whose attributes and behaviors do I think I would want to emulate, because I think that they're keys to their success, or a successful leader. So I have women that I look to as sort of a role model, that I like to see how they handle things and gain experience from that. I have people who actively have supported me, and then there's those who provide some advice. And I think if you have a healthy balance of all three, I think it gives you some good perspective on yourself, but also where you want to take your career.
Now, I've had the advantage of also not just looking at folks within HPE to serve in any of those roles, sponsor, role model, mentor, but my partners. I have I would look at John Calamago, and I mentioned this before, Brenda. I look at John as a mentor for me, and it's never been anything formal. It's watching how he works and how he gets things done, and the characteristics of, and I find this in successful women as well, the characteristics that they exhibit are not necessarily taking credit, giving team members credit, making people want to work with you just by your personality. And because, people want to work with John because he's always very good on give and take and giving credit. And I think that's really important, that my successful role models and mentors are people that do not emphasize what they do. They emphasize what you do. Mm-hmm. And that just allows the people around them to grow, and eventually everybody gets the job done. So that's what I see. And they can be in any of those a role model, a mentor, or a sponsor. Those are the healthy talents that I like to look for in people.
And Patti, you're so spot on, and I don't know if I said this or not, but it doesn't have to be female, right? I mean, these are leadership characteristics. These are behavior characteristics. You're talking about, what you want to emulate and what you would like to see in a leader. And so it can be male or female for sure.
Absolutely. And Amy and I were talking when we were at the EBC recently about, sometimes it's not until after a meeting is over that I realize, oh God, I was the only woman in that meeting. I don't look at it while I'm in the meeting because we're busy getting the job done. And then, of course, when you've been around as long as me, there's a little fear of God in the men in the room if they don't do what it is you're asking to get done, because, mama's here and we're all going to get this done. But I often don't notice it while I'm in the meeting because it's just people you're working with and we're just getting the job done. And it's not a gender issue. But then afterwards, I'll be like, whoa, I was the only one. So interesting.
So I kind of wanted to explore the whole idea of this disparity between, as Amy, you had mentioned before, it's like 52% of men in the workforce, but what is it, 73% in the STEM resources?
73% are basically of the STEM workers are men, right? So that just tells you, and it really hasn't changed that much if you look at it, to that specific, from the Census Bureau information. And this was really just completely rolled up here beginning of 2020. So women, they made some gains for females from 8% of STEM workers in 1970 up 27% to 2019, right? So if you look at that over that time, it's still very much a male dominated field, which I always look at this and saying, I haven't really, again, to the point where I'm talking about, you look around the room and you don't recognize that, to your point, right, Pat? But it's an area that I really do feel I'd like to be able to focus on, and it's a passion of mine, for all early career, for example, right? But I think that COVID is actually offering some changes to people where we look at things differently. We look at it's okay to be able to get on screen, with your 4-year-old. It really, it's become more acceptable, right? In prior, that was something you might see females really owning from a stereotype perspective. So it really has given, I think, people an opportunity to really look at joint parenting overall, because you've really had to be able to do that. I think it's to emphasize that. And it really has had made things from a virtual perspective more accepted, because my biggest concern is that we do have early career females who start in the tech world, but then they drop out. So, being part of this journey, I always want to make sure that I can help coach and mentor how they can continue to stay along that journey and make it into more management, upper level leadership roles.
I would agree with Amy's reference to the transition of how that has become more acceptable. And Brenda, we talked about this the last time we spoke. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, you did not mention that you had children. You did not mention that there was a lacrosse game. You did not mention any of that. You got the job done with all the balls up in the air. And I would say, and you just did it. And it, as men's roles evolved more, co-parenting in the 90s, and I saw that with a lot of my partners, that started making it more acceptable when men took more of an active role. And then I think this whole COVID experience actually just put the lid on it and said, look, we all know we have families. We all know we have other lives. So let's just accept it and trust that I'll get the job done. And I think that really did help us.
I agree completely. And so when I look at that, and you look at, people ask me, well, over your career, what have you really seen about successful women? Or, how have you done that? Or what have you really seen overall? And I say, number one thing is that, clear communications, right? I see a lot, if you look around, and a lot of the female leaders that I have come across, and definitely clear communication. I mean, Leslie represents that every single day in her leadership role. And, the other thing I say is that, as you're coming up through your position in your career path, you want to make sure that you can know your business and then gain that credibility. So credibility is extremely key, which is going to give you that confidence that you can work with your colleagues, right? And even though you may be representing a minority representation in the business, it really will definitely bode well for you, so that you can then look around the room and say, yeah, I guess I was the only female. Of course, our goal is to make sure that we can populate the rooms to be, more on par.
Mm-hmm. So where do you see that change happening? Like, I know, Amy, you mentioned doing mentoring also in school as well. Is that something that has to start early in education?
I firmly believe that, because I do think that we don't really coach females as much to go into STEM fields, right? And so even with my daughter and my nieces, I really encourage them just to find out, to experience it. And there's so many great summer programs, for example, that I know, for instance, Carnegie Mellon has one. I had my daughter try it. Summer engineering experience, for example, that you can go to, going into middle school to really understand, is this something you like? She didn't like it, which is, she's going into, more into the science field, right? Overall, she didn't really like the engineering aspect of it, but it really gives you that opportunity at an early age to really find out, the types of things that you do like. And so it really then provides you that foundation that when you start to get into, high school, to look at what programs, and again, spending time as to where you can excel. And I know that, like, I think according to Forbes magazine, the #1 university for STEM females is the University of North Carolina. So I'm just doing some research. Boston was certainly on the list. I know that UCLA was there, Vanderbilt. So, there's lots of great opportunities here by doing some research early on, and really making sure that we can get females to give it a try, right? So that they have that opportunity.
I also think there's, as young girls look at technology, I think sometimes they they believe you have to, be a programmer or a coder, which is certainly, one role, and we need lots more of those in the workforce. So hopefully a lot of young girls will go into that. But there's also uses of the technology, whether it's sales or marketing or other fields, that you still, having a technical background, don't have to be a programmer, but still really valuable to have that expertise. And so, I think everything we do today is technology. Right. And so I think it just opens up so many more opportunities for women when they go focus on some level of technology. And I think that there's such a tremendous need in the workforce, that the more we can encourage girls to explore technology, and they may ultimately not be a programmer, but still be in many of the roles that are related to technology, is really important.
Speaking of, there are multiple roles that women can take in technology. Are there any like characteristics that you see that would make them more successful in this technical area, regardless of what role they end up taking?
I think in terms of characteristics of successful women in technology, I know Amy started to talk about this, and I completely agree, which is confidence. At the end of the day, if you are, looking to be successful, grow, in a certain area, it doesn't matter what field, but it's confidence. But certainly in the area of technology, I'd encourage people to do their homework, you become that, knowledgeable subject person in your field, whether it's a certain technology, parts of the business, because that's what gives you the confidence. And when you're confident, you can be authentic. And I think for me, the people who I respect, whether it's male or female, tend to be very confident. They tend to be very authentic. And I think those are the people who end up being very successful, because they're also continual learners. And that's what we all need to be, as continual learners, particularly at the rate of change in technology. But I think, as you're learning, you build your confidence, which then lets you be more authentic. And I think it's just, it feeds upon itself. And I think those people tend to be more successful. They're the role models that I look to, as I mentioned, male or female. And so I think I'd recommend to anybody, spend the time, learn the subject matter area, because that's going to give you the confidence you need.
But I think also the confidence is important, but it's that realness, it's that humanness, it's the confidence to say, I understand this, I can do this, but it's also knowing what you can't do. It's also knowing when you have to delegate or ask someone else for help. So, and that is part of being confident. I'm confident that I can't do that, but I know someone who can. And people that I see that are successful, mostly women, I see that they do that, and they do it very naturally.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Pat and Leslie, on that overall. It's just really being able to make sure we can have them invest in themselves. I say that all the time to my team, whether that is a specific, educational program that we have at HPE, whether that is something that, again, is, reading a book. I really personally really like to take the exec online courses. I think they're fantastic. At different universities, we've had the opportunity, and HPE has offered that for us to be able to engage in that. And to me, it's great to be able to see new industry trends and how, we can continue to think differently and expand the business. So that's an area that I definitely recommend as well.
I'm interested in that, Amy. So I am fairly early on in my career. Are there any courses that you would suggest for someone in my position?
Yeah, I mean, depending on what your career path would be, there's an exec online program that's engaged from, Stanford and Harvard, Columbia University, and I just finished one up from Wharton as well. It's about customer centricity, right? So learning, for example, just in some of these cases, these things are refreshers. They're short classes. You get these professors that are obviously top in their field, and you can really learn about what they're seeing in today's world in recent market trends on the customer experience, and why that should make a difference in the marketplace, and why you, as somebody who's positioning to be able to work with them, why that matters, right? So yeah, I highly recommend that. And whether it's the executive online courses or other courses from other universities, there's so many great opportunities in today's world to do them virtually, right? As we've become so proficient in virtual, that it's just being able to do something. It doesn't have to be, elongated, multi-year, but it can be something that you really just take away and learn from, and being able to provide that. Now, that's one of those things where we say we never have time for this. These are
Mhm.
things that I have definitely emphasized, pre-COVID, but also during COVID, even further, to saying I want to carve out time to make sure I can have the ability to do this, because it does make it easier when you're not, you don't have as much, as we talked before about windshield time, Pat, as you mentioned, right? So I definitely recommend that for all levels, is continuing to invest in yourself throughout your entire career. I never stop learning, and it doesn't even have to always be about technology, right? Just learning something every single day. And also on that point is I learn from all of my team members, as well as, my early career and folks that have been in the business for a while. And it's always good to hear their story and learn more about something that they may have been educated on. So I always like to make sure that we can stand and deliver.
Excellent point. I think it's always important for people to be less concerned about how they're coming across and take the time to understand who they're talking to and learn from that. If you're busy worried about how you're coming across, you're not listening to the person in the room. And that's where you really can gain the knowledge. And back to Amy's point, Brenda, Wharton is right in Anexinet's backyard. So there you go with that.
Appreciate it. As we wrap up, I just wanted to give each of you a chance to go around the room. Are there any tools, any habits that you've found in your career that have really helped you to be successful?
It's something that I actually feel very passionate about overall, is that number one, I think, you really want to make sure you build your network, right? No matter where you are in your career path, you always want to make sure that you are meeting and setting up time with people that you value. That's very important, right? And then secondly, my advice is, don't work your business, back on your heels, right? Making sure you're progressing forward, making sure you're taking those leaps. Don't feel as though you can't do that. Feel as though you can, right? Positive attitude, having that mindset is a huge, huge benefit overall. And then thirdly, I always tell my team, get comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? So when you look at your week and you set that up, you want to make sure that you have some form of education on there, something that you want to learn and stretch yourself to and raise that bar. That's extremely important to us so we can all grow. And then last but not least, as I always say, continue to every single day invest in yourself.
So Amy, those are great suggestions, because I think mine are pretty similar. I'd say absolutely creating a network, and the network is not necessarily to get ahead. The network is really to get help and feedback. I think you've got to be comfortable asking for help, because we're not going to all know the answers. We're not going to all have that experience. And I know for me personally, I've got a network of people that I rely on to give me suggestions, honest feedback. Sometimes I don't even want to hear the feedback, but you have to be capable of self-reflection. We're not going to be perfect every day. And so I think the network is really key. And I think to Amy's point, invest in yourself. I think we all could probably do a better job of that. We all have good intentions. I think it's a combination of investing in yourself for your career and then investing in yourself personally. And I think if anything this pandemic has shown us is you have to do both parts. And it's really easy sometimes to be very focused on what do I need to do for my next step at work and in my career. And I think you become even more valuable to the company, but also more importantly for yourself when you do both of those. So I certainly think the network. And then finally, Amy, to your point earlier around, sponsors, there are going to be people who can help you. And as you're asking for that help, you'll start to see who might be interested in investing more of their time to support you. And I think for me, fortunately, I've had some really great people along the way in my career who saw potential in me and really helped me along. And I think trying to find those individuals to help you navigate is really important.
And I would say there's two things, a phrase that I've used with my grown daughters, well, since they were born: do one thing every day that scares you. It doesn't have to be, climbing a mountain, but there's always something, you join a class, do whatever, but do one thing every day that scares you. And then you build up your confidence. And the second thing I would is my role at Anexinet from HPE is that of a trusted advisor. But it's important for me to also have trusted advisors for me. And I mean, I would say these two lovely ladies that are on this call with me are two of my advisors, Amy and Leslie. So if I'm in a quandary about how something can get accomplished, I wouldn't hesitate to ask them. and they wouldn't hesitate to help guide me with no judgment. They'd be like, okay, this is something maybe you might want to think about doing. So I think it's important for folks like in my role. We can't always be going one way when we're working on something. We also need people to be helping us, and it's important to recognize that. And it's not something that is a negative. It's a very positive thing.
Thank you so much. This has all been very illuminating for me. So I wanted to formally thank each of you, Amy, Leslie, and Pat, for coming on today. This has been a genuinely interesting conversation. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Brenda, for having us. Thank Anexinet. And, it's always great to spend time with my colleagues actually at HPE talking about this. I appreciate it.
And I did that. I absolutely appreciate the time and also the interest, right, in the topic and being able to continue to promote that, because I'm a huge fan. So I'm always up for that conversation. So thank you.
Thanks, Brenda.